Welcome, everyone. Dr. Thor here, and welcome to Gnosis. We're going to cover right now is Hal Puthoff, the famous researcher connected to the remote viewing CIA governmental research, and that's what it is. Let's not confuse it with anything else, along with his confederate, Russell Targ. Did the remote viewing and work. But I mean, it's a lot more than that. We need to look at these people are and what's going on and what they've achieved. He's 83 now. So he's really at the end of his life in general. He's still pretty active, apparently. But let's look into Hal. Dr. Hal Puthoff. Who is he? Well, it's very interesting. He graduated from electrical engineering from the University of Florida. And I'm wondering, what's interesting about him is I do research, and as most Sewerpedia listings have, there's no birthplace of his and no talk about anything else. I'm assuming he's removed this for security reasons or for personal reasons. There's no information on him being married, his children, or what state he was born in. Usually you go, if you go to the University of Florida, I'm assuming that probably he was from that area. We don't know. Doesn't talk about his personal background, etc. We're assuming he comes from, he's Jewish, but I'm not entirely sure. You never know, whatever that means. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time with this. I'm not sure it's that critical, but none of the usual Sewerpedia details are there. But after graduating, he served in the Army on duty. So he went into the Army and went on duty with the NSA at Fort Meade. Isn't that interesting, in Maryland? He worked as an engineer with Project Light, which studied fiber optics, lasers, high-speed computers, etc. And of course, you got to remember, this is when this was really cutting-edge stuff. Just like his friend Russell Targ, who also was a laser specialist. So he's a fiber optic laser specialist, and he apparently invented the tunable infrared red laser, which was, we look at those today. I don't know how many people do, because people don't seem to know anything about lasers. But this was very cutting-edge stuff back there, and he's the use of massive lasers that we use today in DVD, CD players, scanning our groceries, etc., are all thanks to him and Russell Targ. That's one of his major accomplishments. He, even though he also worked for the NSA for quite a long period of time, apparently, and this is all part of it. So, and then moved on, as most of these people do. They go into government contractors and research organizations, and he was involved in Navy secret programs as well, apparently. Yeah, I'm always amused by skeptics who try and demonize these people like they're some weirdos that were part of the Hare Krishna banging drums half their life, or on LSD somewhere, when they're very conservative people. They're involved with the intelligence industry, and that's of course how he got all these contracts to study all these things, is that he is heavily connected with them, knows all those people, has their clearances, and also is under their control because they have non-disclosure agreements. Everybody in the military, and this goes almost everywhere in the world, you have to sign a non-disclosure agreement, meaning that, whatever you learn here, whatever we talk about, is not something you share with the public. There's a lot of good reasons for this. The problem with government is that it's our money, and we should know about what's happening, and I'm not sure how much all this secrecy means anyway. It tends to just create a cabal of corrupt, rotten people. But we do have to understand where this guy came from. Here he is this typical egghead, and a lot of these eggheads tend to be a kind of little kinky. They're a little strange, they're a little odd. Here's a guy who came out of what appeared to be pretty low-level stations in life and family. We don't know again. But you generally don't go into the military unless you were forced to, but it could be during times of the Vietnam War. Not entirely sure what the situation is here. It does seem to be 60s, 70s, so maybe this was something you had to do to avoid being drafted and murdered in Vietnam. But generally, when you have this kind of things, I mean, why would you do that? But here's your connection again, and of course, it would be nice if how people would detail how they get contracts, how this was done, etc. But you can read all the different books written by these two people, which isn't very much, and get some more details. But is any of that real? I have problems with it. It's always good to hear their side of it. One of the interesting things is that the entire SRI seems to be heavily connected to Scientology. Which, of course, back then was much more credible, and to a degree, even though there's always problems with Scientology, I remember knowing some people in the 70s, and they would tell you, hey, sell your car, you need this training. This is vital to your life. Well, how you expected to survive if you don't have a car, or even get to the Scientology teachings, I'm not really sure, but they're always a big pusher on forcing you and manipulating you to spend lots of money with them. And they've done this all over the world, and they've been kicked out of different countries because of it. Now, Scientology was a great way at that particular time, particularly in the 60s. It was a big alternative to traditional religions, which were starting to break down already if they were ever strong to begin with. So the whole idea is this was an interesting alternative, and it basically was a psychic mind, brain-based philosophy with other accredited by what people think it is psychology. So they studied the brain, how these worked, and all these other things, and had an interesting little mythology based on aliens and everything else that were infecting the earth. After all, the founder of that, L. Ron Hubbard, was a great science fiction writer and extremely prolific, apparently. But it's very interesting that Pat Price was their main guy to assist with them. It was supposed to be extremely powerful, and he was a Scientologist, and it's even been alleged that he was actually murdered because part of the Scientology reality is you go in there and you tell them everything about your life, and they put you on lie detectors and everything else. This is how they work, and you have to tell them everything that's happening in your life. Interesting enough, Ingo Swann was also involved, and apparently Hal Puthoff was not only involved, but he went to the highest possible level, which means he heavily studied their teachings. He went through all of their auditing, which is where you sit in front of people on a lie detector and they ask you all sorts of personal things to get by your hang-ups. I mean, it's an interesting system unto itself, and probably has some particular merit if it wasn't, which appears to be now, ran by... if it ever was, but L. Ron Hubbard himself was kind of a weird, freaky dude. So I don't know how much we can say that this was a relatively normal organization to begin with. So listening to him talk and everything else, what an odd egg this guy was. His Dianetics books is interesting, and here we go away from it. People were moving away from religions, and his book came out, and it was a fantastic bestseller. So a lot of people have read this, a lot of people got involved, and while it is now diminishing because of all the problems with Scientology and their what appears to be their alleged abuses, it was huge, and particularly in the 60s, because this was something, as I said, that was alternative to kind of ridiculous religions. But it is interesting and involved in it. It was also stated that, and of course, of all these people except Pat Price, who was eventually died or has been alleged murdered by the intelligence community, were supposedly dropped away from the church or from the Scientology organization. Each one of them quitting at some time, including Hal Puthoff, who quit in the 70s. But he was told, he must have been told to quit. You can't have secret information and then spill your guts to anybody. That's what your government contracts are about. And to be involved in an organization that requires you to talk about every intimate area of your life your fears, your sexuality, and what you're doing in life, certainly is a fantastic risk. And to participate in an organization like that is insane. And if you're going to allow to give somebody clearances. So I'm assuming, especially since Puthoff reached the highest possible level, there really wasn't much to learn anyway. And I'm sure he was smart enough that he figured out, well, what more am I going to get from this organization? Why should I bother being involved in it? And that he was quite willing to drop it. So did Ingo Swann. So did everybody else that was connected to this organization. Once they got involved with the CIA, and obviously so, even though the CIA allows, or I should say the U.S. military and the CIA allows Satanists and all sorts of other people to give them the top clearances, because after all, they're stable. Michael Aquino. So the whole idea is that Christopher Bird, the famous author of The Secret Life of Plants and so many other things, a big researcher, Christopher Bird, and who died mysteriously, saw how Puthoff use e-meters, which are a type of galvanic skin response machines, otherwise known as lie detectors. He used that particular type of machine for some experiments. But there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, the Scientologists probably have extremely excellent e-meters, since they use these things as a major part of their practices. So I'm assuming they've evolved e-meters to the highest possible level, and they control them. You can't even buy them on the secondary market like eBay, etc. Which is very, very interesting. So there's definitely a connection there, whatever that may be. I mean, that may be a positive connection, showing that he is, well, it is a positive, because they're talking about using brain energies, connecting to higher sources, not getting involved in kind of these silly belief systems and other things. So I think that helped evolve people who are trying to get past the I'm a meat puppet reality that common religions teach you. Regardless of these sources, which are not really sure how governmental connected they are. They've had problems with the government. They've interacted with it. It seems like Scientology, it's its own rogue organization with lots of money, and they own a lot of people, from attorneys to police departments, so it is alleged. And so we really don't know what's going on there. They have an alternative viewpoint, but they also have all these strange connections. So I'm not sure really what's going on there. So when we look at how Puthoff's research, of course, he was involved with all this stuff, the remote viewing and everything else with Russell Targ. He's not very active in that area, talking about it, etc. He's put his 2 cents together and written a couple of books, but he stepped away from all that once the government contracts and moved into what he was more interested in, and that's space drives, zero-point energy, and electrogalvanics, whatever it is of the states here, quantum physics, etc. So the whole idea forming his Institute of Advanced Studies, which is based in Austin. And of course, anytime you're based in Texas is a real giveaway of how government controlled you are. But of course, NASA's there, which he's working with, but you would think you don't have to be in their necessarily backyard to work with them. But he's again connected to all those people, which is radio. So the guy's nothing but a government connector from the minute he's starting his career in the U.S. military and working at Fort Meade for all the NSA, etc. So I mean, from day one, that's one reason why he got contracts and everything else, is that he was trusted. He was able to talk to the right people. He was able to say, "Hey, I'm one of you guys." So the whole idea is that he was able to get his way in there and work for these people. So you'd be able to get contracts and all the other things that happen with these type of situations, because you have no credibility of somebody, even if you're highly educated and everything else. But if you tell people, well, I was working with the NSA, I haven't involved, well, I mean, this opens a lot of doors for you in terms of the fact that he would just be able to get in contact with these people and start getting that money flowing. Now I'm assuming because of his alternative training with Scientology, this was kind of an interest of his. But you got to remember that he was involved in lasers and worked for these companies before and made lots of money, and was had that background to fall back upon, just as Russell Targ did, as being one of the first people to develop lasers and bring them to the public, and made lots of money and worked for those companies. So it's not like they lived their whole life doing this. Was almost without sitting down and figuring it all out. It's kind of a secondary or almost a second career for these people. One of his prize pupils was Pat Price, who was this guy supposed to be so amazing, which we know very little of. But ironically, he met him at Scientology. So here we go again. There's a whole bunch of stuff. But the bottom line is that who were the psychic organizations in the 60s that had something going other than some Eastern yogic group or so forth? And while there was great interest, well, the Scientologists were very big in this area, and they attract a lot of people who were into alternative mental functioning. So it's not like that's overly surprising, and I don't really make too much of that, even though it's very interesting. They obviously showing that once it came between pick Scientology or their government whoredom, they jumped on the government whoredom. So I think that's a good statement for everybody to know. He also working with Robert Bigelow, who I've covered in other videos here, the National Institute of Discovery Science that he started. Well, he's connected there again. He's been connected to all sorts of remote viewing groups that are government connected again, all of them connecting with retired General John Alexander, who's into all this stuff, and he doesn't, they don't break the mold. They don't go out there and get alternative people that they work with. So there's always these rat in the woodpile reality that is happening all the time. And as I said, we can't underestimate that Puthoff's work for General Electric and its military divisions, Sperry and its military divisions, Department of Defense, and all the other ones. He has a certificate of outstanding performance with working with the Department of Defense, and was heavily connected, obviously, with the Stanford University Research Organization, which now is private, but before was hooked up to the college and everything else. He, after it states in different places, after giving 2 weeks' notice, he all of a sudden in 1985 jumped over to become this director of advanced studies, which is space propulsion devices and quantum communication, etc. Now, this is certainly interesting quantum science, but it certainly isn't getting into the realm of viewing consciousness and the mind. It is dealing with zero-point energies he's interested in, space program and all this stuff, but none of this really is mind science based. It's quantum physics based and how we interact with it. But these aren't things that are based in what we would call, quote, psychic studies, so to speak. And unfortunately, like all these people, he's made his money from all this. He used his connections at SRI and other places and his NSA connections to put together quite a nice little career. He was able to go into the aerospace industry, into high levels of it, make lots of money, as being well paid for many, many years. He then took all that credibility, and I tend to think the reason why his new institute and other things are working and everything else is these are kind of payoffs for the work he did for the NSA and CIA with the so-called remote viewing and other things, which certainly they didn't pour a lot of money into, but I'm assuming that they made some good money from it. But what has he done? Well, he's done virtually nothing. He's written 3 or 4 books, some of these with Russell Targ. What has he left? Is there anything going on? He's got this institute to take care of his little baby and what fascinates him, which is zero-point energy and quantum communication. But he's not really doing anything outside of his little ego realm in terms of helping the public or fostering the understanding and the research into the psychic, quote, sciences. None of this has happened. He's got institutes that aren't doing any of that. Now, whether there's something going in the background there, I don't know. But the bottom line is that if it is, it's going out to government again, which is all clamped down under contracts where you can't talk about anything. So you rarely hear him go on any shows or do anything else, unlike Russell Targ is relatively busy in some of these areas. But I don't see any of it. He doesn't even have his own little baby where there's some little institute he pours money into where people are doing a more remote viewing research on their own. Seems to have plenty of money to fund this institute he's got. And it seems to me that all these people are living quite high on the hog, so to speak. There don't seem to be any money problems that we ever hear about. But certainly, what has he done? Well, he did this research on remote viewing, which is mostly carried on by Russell Targ, who's published many more books and talks about it and is relatively public, but you don't hear anything from him. I don't think he's even ever done an interview on Jeffrey Mishlov's program or anything else. We rarely see him anywhere. Well, it's not like he's totally unheard of, but he has not done a show that I can find with Jeffrey Mishlove, which is one of the prominent people in the field. He has done other interviews, including with the strange guy out of New York, Alan Steinfeld. And of course, you can listen to all these and get other things, but I'm not really sure he has anything to say. You can't say anything from a legal point of view anyway. It's almost a joke of what you can piece together and what they insinuate in some areas, and it's really getting to be, for a long-term researcher like me, boring. But what has he done? He's filled his pockets. He's done fun research that he enjoys, stuff that will never be brought to the public. We have anti-gravity devices already working. We have intergalactic space travel capacities already. This has been stated from the top people in the government, particularly from Lockheed Skunk Work, who announced this as retirement. We have this capacity to a group of people. And so he's studying the same old dead thing, being involved with the same old dead group of corrupt liars and deceivers, otherwise known as the United States military. But, what you try and do is, while this is a system that's difficult to beat, you try and do more. And I don't see any of this. None of these parapsychologists have left anything. Jeffrey Mishlove is not setting up programs so new parapsychologists can come along. They don't have some sort of foundation that assists parapsychologists. Certainly Russell Targ has done absolutely nothing. He's another guy that almost died a year or so ago and has a pacemaker now and is another old man. Puthoff is 83 years old now, and they're into these space. But where is the more consciousness places? And of course, they haven't written much. They haven't sponsored people to write books in these areas. So even if you don't want to write books, you could sponsor people. You could help certain individuals. Now, he's working with this Tom Delonga guy, which I just covered in another video, who started To the Stars Foundation, almost entirely made up of government corrupt liars and cheats. The intelligent community, which has been nothing but deceiving people, who has been alleged to have a huge criminal background, from smuggling drugs and everything else to finance their operations. Certainly, none of these organizations have any kind of credibility and are basically rogue criminals working for themselves, as far as we can tell. Well, what's going on? And of course, this old man, certainly not feisty enough, they won't even take on the debunkers. They won't go out to the dumb bunkers and the idiot skeptics and confront them with real information. They won't pay somebody to do it. But you've got those very credited people, the juggler, Penn Jillette, the guy who tricks you for $100 in a seat that you go to Vegas for. You've got the criminal, the convicted criminal, Brian Dunning skeptic. You have the unamazing Randy, who hasn't graduated from high school, has been involved in legal problems and alleged all sorts of sexual shenanigans, that he has been recorded talking to people on the telephone, talking about these things. It goes on and on with these people. And this is the main people out there that are pushing ahead their agenda being unmet by anybody. Where are those organizations? Where's the magazine, not Skeptic Magazine, where's a magazine put out by these people? Well, it seems to me there's a lot of egotistical, self-driven, and downright cheap and rude to the people that have made them, or the science that they have gotten into, that they do absolutely nothing. There's no, when Puthoff dies in a few years, what has he left? Well, I don't know what he's left. He's got a few books. He's got some research he's done, all this stuff. But there's a lot of researchers on anti-gravity and quantum physics and everything else that you can read about, that were about, you can listen to them on the old Bill Jenkins radio shows that had working technologies, curing people, free energy. It's all gone. 40 years later, absolutely zero. What do you think is going to happen with his technology? Well, I'm pretty sure that all the government suppressing that goes on, sitting in their anti-gravity crafts, which I have witnessed personally from 500 feet away, is a joke. And what he's doing is a joke. And he knows it. And it's more of that put out there to put actually getting black money going towards the projects that these people want it to go towards. So they can go to Mars anytime they want, almost instantaneously, because they already have this technology. So are you trying to tell me that Hal Puthoff doesn't know that? Well, all of this is kind of a joke. I mean, it's out there. Thousands of people have seen the government anti-gravity crafts. It's pretty much common knowledge. And while there's a few people that come out and have the balls to talk about it, that were ex-government scientists, or whether they're paid different disinformation agents or not, they're talking about this to slowly get the information out. Certainly Hal Puthoff has never did it. He doesn't come to the rescue of any of the science, the psychics that he got involved with. Ingo Swann knows this. Ingo Swann, who became very disillusioned with the entire process once she saw the filth and corruption involved in it, where it was going nowhere, even though everything was proved, was very disillusioned, didn't want to get involved in anything. But he's a guy also that couldn't fix himself, very ill in his later life as well. So there are problems there. And here we go with another guy that's really done nothing. I'm not sure that the perpetration of the remote viewing reality, which is done by an group of cabals within the dominating, corrupt military industrial complex, has done anybody for anybody. They've got this information out there. They've made all their little military whores, these people who have been connected to the military and are being paid their salaries now, their retirements, and been taken care of all their life by the military. Basically, they are now make them rich to go out there and push this, so they have generation after generation are being taught now, so that the government can step in and flash their patriotic badge at you and say, your country needs you. We need to go kill some people somewhere. Some poor little Latins or some poor little Muslims who don't even have chairs or running water. But we got to do this. So it's the ridiculousness of this is the same. And I remember in the 1970s when there was this great anti-communist movement still going on, where the government was selling wheat to the Russians to make sure they had plenty of food because their wheat crop failed. So the whole idea is that, was that what you give food to your enemy? Well, I mean, this is the type of counter nonsense that you run into. So we certainly shouldn't be doing that. As we move on to all of these areas, it's a big, giant joke. And what has he done? Well, at least Ruckelshaus is kind of out there trying to do things, even getting a movie produced by a kiddie from film school. At least he's out there trying to do things, and I think he's written at least double the amount of books, and he's trying to get a little bit out as he gets older in life to some degree to release this information. Certainly, Hal Puthoff has done absolutely nothing. His little egotistical research on energy, working with an organization which is nothing but secret service, I should say CIA agents, is laughable. And this is supposed to be good, because these people who can't legally and are tied to extremely strict contracts, non-disclosure agreements, as I've said many times, are all of a sudden going to give all this information out. They're going to give up all their government paychecks, and they're going to go face-to-face against these things? Well, there's all sorts of things that happen. I think Dr. Bell learned what happens when you talked about really dangerous things like death rays. So Dr. Fred Bell, who after talking to Jesse Ventura for his TV show, on death rays, the following day died. Coincidence or targeted death being? Well, I'm not a big fan of coincidence. So it's just that it could have happened anytime. Why this time? Statistically, if you want to go into the science of it all, you're talking about billions or trillions to one that he would die after talking to somebody about this. Yet it was part of the discussion was how people who talked about this all died. Very interesting. So what has he done? Well, it seems to me he's a big sellout. He's been involved with the government spooks since he's been out of college by joining the military, either to hide or because it was an easy meal ticket. Whatever it may be, it is pretty revolting on my understanding of reality. And certainly he's done nothing. And there's certainly nothing special about zero-point energy or quantum communication devices either. We have quantum computers now, and now we're going to have quantum communication device, which is really not that much of a breakthrough either. But there's absolutely nothing in human consciousness intelligence. You ought to be studying the human brain, but apparently he's caught up into a lot of silly science, which connects to the human brain. But I'd like to see more directed research, and I don't know what he's come up with. He claims to have this communication device, which obviously is already in use and probably been in use for maybe 50 or 60 years, just like we've had anti-gravity now. Probably... I would guess we've had anti-gravity for at least 40 years now. And these crafts have been sighted all over the United States. And they are American military crafts. These are not UFOs. So, totally silent, totally sitting in the air, and that's it. And they're pretty large. So all of this is there. All of it is... been documented by myself and many others, and other people that are even with me at that particular time that saw this. So all of this is a reality that we need to fully understand is going on. And what did this guy do? Well, I don't think he's done anything. His whole pushing out of remote viewing. It isn't even him pushing remote viewing. They didn't come out with training manuals. They didn't come out with books helping in these areas directly. This was all done at the pushing of their government handlers to get this information out there so they didn't have to deal with the backlash of the ignoramus Congress and their goofball followers. So they put it out on the public and they've pushed these people ahead, and apparently they've all made a lot of money. But let's remember they were in the military-industrial complex to begin with, both of them, by working for aerospace companies, which are nothing more than government welfare organizations. They're just branches of the government. They're private contractors, but that's kind of amusing. There's no such thing as a contractor unless someone's giving you money. So private meaning they're not 100%, but they are 100%. When you give somebody money to do research, that you own them. They cannot take your money and spend it on yachts or research the sex life of TT flies. They have to do what you tell them to do. Not only that, anything that they discover, you own. Well, that's a private contractor? Well, you're not a private contractor. You're just not directly, you are directly paid technically. So you're really nothing more than a government employee. So thinking that these terms there's nothing private or independent about it. You just kind of poorly, you're just not guaranteed consistent income because you are a direct employee. You're temporary. You're a temp. So Hal Puthoff, the temp, did nothing. Achieved nothing, and there's nothing out there. Now, if I'm wrong, as usual, I'm more than happy for anybody to correct me on any of these things. You have better information to give me on anything, I'm open to it because it's so difficult to find anything true. But the greatest thing he's doing now is get involved with another huge CIA operation to the stars with Tom DeLonga, the idiot band guy. Really? He wants to make science fiction and change the world for his kiddies. Oh, God. So it's unbelievable. So just like Walt Disney was not a spy for the FBI, so it is alleged. So the point is they're all caught in these things, and they all wave the flag in front of your face while they clip the handcuffs and shackles on you. So this is ridiculous, and it produces nothing. You think at his older age, in his 80s now, that he'd be doing something of much more value, because none of this technology, even if it's valid, would be used for anything to assist mankind. We have an entire world that is so corrupt that it's laughable. There's huge drug shortages. People can't get drugs anymore. They're going to shoot the prices that are high already so far up that you won't be able to afford anything. There are shortages of antibiotics, regular drugs of all types. This is all happening because of the of what's going on now. And what is he doing about it? What is he doing to get out there and talk about it? We have massive tens of millions of people who don't have housing. We have half of the I would say 80% of the United States population doesn't have proper health care, doesn't have health care insurance, and doesn't have health care of a proper level, period. It could be, I would say, at least 80, maybe 90%. And it's getting worse and worse. What is he doing about this? Space communication? Zero-point energy? Well, let me tell you something, Hallie Puthoff. We have free energy. It's called hydrogen, which our entire planet is made of. You can convert any internal combustion engine to a hydrogen car within a couple of hours. It's been done. Prototypes have been made. Every single company that makes cars has a hydrogen car that works. Plain and simple. You don't have the balls to come out and do it because you're a coward CIA little whore. Plain and simple. And that's what all these people are that dodge around this saying how alternative they are when they don't confront skeptics and bunkers and protect those people out there who have abilities and push them ahead. They don't do it. Why aren't you into free energy? It's there. Ford Motor Company has had these prototypes for over 30 years working every day. No retooling, no nothing. Convert the dumb internal combustion engine into a hydrogen burner virtually instantly for very small amounts of money. No, we're going to make space drives. Ooh, let's play water rockets. You're really a disgrace, and this is what's wrong with this world. This is what happens. Then they don't stand up and they don't do anything. This is an egotistical thing. He's pushed into this for government contractors to work on nonsensical stuff that has no value. And quite frankly, as we all know, it's already been there. He's the guy that's going to write a paper on it, and after he dies 5 years from now, some other government agent will come up and say, yeah, thanks to him, we now have this working technology. Yeah, had that working technology 30 years ago. But let's not confuse anybody with the facts, people. Just more gnosis, and I hope people are understanding it, at least are listening to my voice here. And remember, everyone, there is no reality until the manifesting scientist creates it.